So in this video I'm talking about and showing how I photograph butterflies in flight. I've come to a reserve reasonably near me. It's called the Phylis Currie Nature Reserve. It's part of Essex Wildlife Trust reserves, and there's the area I'm actually concentrating on is this wildflower meadow. Now it's a very good reserve. There's actually over behind the trees over there, there's a couple of large lakes. You're getting great for dragonflies, damselflies. There's also a hide where they have a kingfisher come quite regularly to perches that are placed in front of the hide. But what I'm concentrating on here is trying to do butterflies in flight. Now photographing a butterfly in flight is quite difficult because if you're trying to just track them as they're flying around, any autofocus, don't matter what camera you've got, is going to struggle. I found by far the easiest way to do is to find one that's actually on a plant or roosting or that sort of thing there. Lock onto it with the autofocus and wait for it to fly. You spend a much better chance of getting shots of it in flight just after it's taken off, rather than just seeing a butterfly flying around trying to lock onto it and follow focus with it. Now the lens and camera that I'm using today is the OM1, and I'm using the 40 to 150 with a 1.4 converter on. Now you might say, if you're photographing butterflies, why don't you use a macro lens? Well, the main reason is because with a macro lens, even sort of with a 90mm, I've still got to be fairly close to it to get a decent sized image in the frame. With this, it gives me a lot bigger working distance. I can photograph a butterfly from 10 foot away and still get a decent sized image in the actual frame. The advantage also of photographing them from further away than you would with a macro lens is that it allows me to actually use a tripod. Haven't got to worry too much about getting close enough to it or anything, so I can set the tripod up, wait for it to fly, and then press the shutter button. So this part of the reserve, this meadow here, is absolutely full of wildflowers there. So there's plenty of food source for the butterflies to feed and nectar on. And it's just a case of really looking for one that's got a nice clean backdrop and waiting for it to fly. So you might say, well, why am I actually got the camera on a tripod to actually photograph them? The reason is that when you see a butterfly on a plant or anything there, it might be feeding, that sort of thing there, you don't know how long it's going to be there. It might be there for 10 seconds, it might be there for 3 or 4 minutes. And actually hand holding a camera, it doesn't matter if it's a small lens, actually hand holding it for 3 or 4 minutes can get quite tiring. Not only that, but often as not, you're going to lose concentration because you're hand holding it, you're waiting for it to fly. Now normally speaking, if you try to do it, you actually catch it when it flies away, the chances are you're going to miss it. When you're photographing birds and you're waiting for a bird to take off, you can actually get a little indication sometimes when they're about to go, because sometimes they'll tense up, they'll just tense up and just crouch a little bit just before they spring off and fly. If you can spot that, you know straight away they're going to actually fly. You don't get that sort of warning with butterflies. Now, if I was just to sort of use my sort of natural sort of reaction time, and I've photographed and locked onto the butterfly there, wait for it to fly, by the time it flies, my eye sees it taking off, and I actually press the shutter button, chances are the butterfly is going to be halfway out the frame, if not fully out the frame. So the way to do it is to use Pro Capture, and I know I've been on about Pro Capture before, but it's something that I actually utilise an awful lot and use an awful lot. Now, when I changed from Canon to Olympus about 6 years ago now, I'd heard about Pro Capture. It was something that I thought, well, I'm not really going to use it much. I've managed all these years without it. Once you try it out and realise what it's actually capable of, you'll start to think, well, how the hell did I manage without it? So when that butterfly is sitting there I'm half pressing the shutter button, and what it's doing is continually taking a series of pictures, not actually filling the card up, it's holding them in a buffer. And what happens is all of a sudden the butterfly takes off, I fully press the shutter button, and then I get it as it's a series of pictures as it's taken off. So today is actually quite windy, so there's not as many butterflies flying today as I'd hoped. When I came yesterday morning, it was quite warm and it was sunny. It's a bit cooler today. They're not anywhere near as active, and it allowed me to get lots of shots. Now you get lots of different types of butterfly at this particular reserve. You get large whites, and that's the vast majority of the butterflies that are flying around at the moment are large whites, but you also get gatekeepers, meadow browns, skippers, common blues and that sort of thing. So quite a wide variety of butterflies that you get here, and it's really just a case of looking around until you find one that's perched up on the top of some plants, and then sort of, just because I'm 10 foot away from it, I'm not actually going to disturb it with a tripod. Now if I was using a 60 or a 90mm macro lens, I've got to get really quite close to it, and the chances are before I even get it in focus it's going to fly off. Using the longer lens, this 40 to 150 with a 1.4 converter, it gives me that 10-foot working distance, so it makes a hell of a difference to the ease of taking the pictures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wander around and see what I can find. I think it's a case of I might actually come back tomorrow if it's going to be a bit warmer, but there's quite a bit of wind and it's a lot cooler today. But this reserve is very, very good for photographing butterflies, and what I'll do is wander around and see what I can get. So I might, when I'm photographing, what I might actually do is look through the viewfinder to check that I've got it framed up and everything there. But rather than having to hold my eye to the viewfinder all the time, what I'll do is just half press the shutter button and just watch on the back of the screen, and when I see it go, fully press the shutter button. It's brightening up quite nicely now, so soon the butterflies will really start buzzing around here. So now the sun's come out and the temperature's actually, the wind's dropped and the temperature's come up, and that's really made a difference. The butterflies now are really quite active. There's quite a few large whites here. There's also some gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are actually quite difficult to do, because whereas the large whites will just sit up on the top of the plant quite happily, the gatekeepers tend to sort of be lower down in the vegetation, so it's more difficult to get a clear shot of them. But it's just a case really of persevering. I do use the custom function settings on the OM1, and I have C1 set for normal photography and C2 set for Pro Cap. This means I can quickly change to Pro Cap as and when needed. My settings for Pro Cap are: I shoot in aperture priority. My standard ISO setting is ISO 1600. To get the desired shutter speed, I will increase the ISO if necessary. I shoot wide open at an aperture of f4.5. It's important when photographing a fast flying butterfly or bird that the shutter speed does not fall below 1,320th of a second. I have the subject detection set to birds. I know a butterfly is not a bird, but it's the nearest thing in the subject detection, and I find the autofocus locks on pretty well when it's set to birds. I set the focusing points to large rather than all, and obviously the focusing is set to continual autofocus. I set the pre-shutter rate to 25 frames and the after shutter rate set to 10. so it's a total of 35 frames in the burst. Then it's just a case of half pressing the shutter to activate ProCap and then fully pressing the shutter when the butterfly takes flight. It's important to select a butterfly that has a reasonably clear background. If the butterfly is lower down in the vegetation, I usually ignore it and walk around until I find one higher up and in a clearer position, as with this common blue. It's important when framing up the shot to leave enough space for the butterfly to fly into. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.